Welcome to Kind Animal Services. My name is Kelsey, and we're going to review one of my training sessions. This is my first training session with Scout. Scout is, I think that we guessed him, or they told me that he was 7. He is a Heffinger pony, and this is my first training session with him. I have done training sessions with him and his human, but this is my very first training session with him alone. And we're doing a weekend stay at the farm. That's what we're gonna do in this video. We're gonna dive right into my recording of my training session, and I'm gonna try to walk you through what's happening and what I'm seeing, and even some critiques of my own. I kind of jumped into this training session a little premature. I didn't know exactly where I was gonna go with it, and you can kind of see how I'm using positive reinforcement to begin to teach him that he is in control of the environment, and he's also in control of that food delivery. Scout is extremely food motivated, so this has been a big challenge for his human to be able to incorporate feeding into training. Another note is that I am using a crop. This is like a dressage crop whip. I am using this because I have some concern about him invading my space. And as a safety sort of tool in this time, in this moment of his training, being this is the first time that I've worked with him, I'm just not comfortable being in the same environment as he is with food on me and not being completely plowed over for that food. I don't think he has the skills to give me some space. So let's dive into the video. Well, I'm going to be experimenting here with jackets and things because we're going into winter, and I get bundled up because I get cold when I come out to visit horses. I'm currently in a little tack room. I really don't need a helmet on. I don't know why I put a helmet on. I put a helmet on because it makes me think and feel more official. I'm going to work Scout, who is basically right outside this door. I mean, he might have just ventured off to do something else. I think I'm just going to try to put hay and use hay for most of my treats. I found a bucket. I'm just thinking that I need something to carry the hay in. So I just attached a bucket to my belt. So I'm hoping that I can carry hay without being attacked. That's gonna be what we're gonna try to do. So I'm gonna grab some hay. Oh, no. Good boy. Yes. Good job. So there you go. There's Scout. He opened the door. He would just come in without invitation. Ah! You stay out. Good boy. Good job. So we might be able to start a training session right here. I was thinking he might be too pushy because there's so much food to be had in here that I was a little worried that he might be a little too pushy and try to come into the room. We got Scout. He's coming in the door. The reason why I have a crop. So this is one reason why I'm going to work with a crop in my hand. And I'm not using this as a training tool. I'm using this as a safety tool. This is to get space when I am invaded by him. So I'm letting him eat this. This is totally fine. You can have that. Nope. Yes. Good boy. I am going to use a little bit of pressure on him, mostly just to keep things safe, because horses are big, and this particular horse knows he can push. Nope. Yes, good. Good boy. Okay. You see that pushiness? Nope. Nope. So I'm not going to let him come into the barn. There's a bunch of hay right here that he's trying to go for. Yes, good. Good boy. He's bored of. Back it up. Good boy. That's okay. Good. The hay is actually working really well, so I'm going to keep using this. Good. Yeah, you don't get to eat out of my bucket. Nope. When he gives me a little bit of eye, yes, good boy. I'm happy to feed him. Oh, okay. You shoved that out of your way. He's mic cut out as well. So in this part of it, I have Scout eating off of the ground right inside the tack room, but his feet are still beyond the tack room door and outside the tack room door. Again, he went for the hay pile, and I used the crop to kind of mitigate that action. That was much smoother when in my like hay delivery. Way better. So now we're getting some clean loops. He's looking away, he's staying outside, he's chewing, and I'm able to, if I should reward right here, I'm able to reward cleanly. I guess he's self-rewarding, and I'm letting him do that. Honestly, I'm processing a lot of it at the same time. So in order to get into that really nice, clean feedback loop, I have to kind of take a moment and really look at my situation in that moment. So that's the one thing about being a trainer is being able to train smoothly. And so there's always kind of these little glitches and hiccups because in real life, I'm also problem solving. There, I started feeding again in some clean loops, and what I'm doing is taking a step away from the door. So he is reaching in a little bit, and I did block him with the crop. He's not going for the hay pile anymore. He's just checking me out, which is really good. Right there, yes. Excellent, he got a big bite. Good. So I'm starting to ask him to back away from me. I did bring up the crop just to kind of be ready, and then stepped towards him and towards the door and asked him to reverse backwards. A little blocking because his head was getting a little too close for comfort. So I'm going to step into his space. And I'm also offering kind of a cue that's pretty common in the horse training world, in the standard horse training world, the cue of kind of waving your crop or waving your hand or jiggling the lead rope is a common cue for backing a horse up. So I'm kind of doing that. I think that cue's been used on him before, but he definitely wasn't very responsive to it. So here I just waited. He was listening to something outside. I waited, and then I offered the cue again when he was looking at me. He did take a step back. Very nice, and I was able to feed. Good. So I'm cueing more than I'd like, but again, this is the first kind of communication training session, so this is building a foundation for all future training to come. He came back into my space, and I asked him to back up. I paused when he turned his head away from me, and I just stopped. So his head wasn't getting rewarded, but I also was kind of letting off pressure because I don't want to send him away. None of what I'm doing is trying to send him away, but that crop maybe was producing a little bit too much pressure for him. All right, we're on to the next clip. So I started pushing a little bit harder, and part of why I pushed harder in this moment is because of I know that's what he's had in the past. I also wanted to see if I could get him some quick repetitions in in positive reinforcement. And so I kind of pushed him a little bit harder because I kind of felt like he should know maybe some of these things. It was proving he didn't know these things very well, but I was just trying to get some successful repetitions. So I was pushing so I could get a step from him, a backward step, and out of my space, so I could reward him more frequently. And then this is where I'm at now, which is this looping pattern. So this is interesting. So because I'm in a doorway, he can't swivel his hindquarters on me, which is something that he kind of wants to do. And so here he starts kind of tuning out. I can't really see what's happening. But he tunes out, and he's kind of tried to swivel his hindquarters, but he couldn't. There's a wall over on one side. And the food is here as well. So he kind of wants to keep an eye on it. And this is where he's really testing his boundaries, testing his limits. And often after this moment of kind of peak testing or heightening, the animal will, especially horses, you'll see a really nice transition to where they become much more responsive. And so now he's kind of catching on, like it's starting to click. Working with hay as the reinforcer is definitely something that's new for me. Not exactly used to that. So there was definitely some fumbling of hay while I'm trying to pull the hay apart. There's some serious fumbling as it gets kind of stuck on things in the bucket and doesn't get in his mouth, and he drops it. So what he's doing now is he's just turning his head to look away. He's not backing up anymore. But he's remaining in a sort of neutral He's crowding my space quite a bit here. So I leaned my body forward and kind of took a very small step into his space. And he actually stepped out of my space, which is the goal of what we're doing here. I mentioned combining new cue or old cue with new cue, meaning that I'm just going to take his old cue of what I assume is his old cue of pressure and the crop and pushing against him to move him backwards into the new cue, which will be the word back. And I would still say that the stepping into his space and having him back up is part of the new cue. That was really nice. He moved both his front and his back foot in that. So it was really hard because I'm working right in this tack room, feed room doorway, and he knows that all of the grain and hay and everything else comes from this room. So I'm definitely in a challenging spot. There's kind of pros and cons to where I'm at. One, I'm in a doorway that has a step up, so he can step through it, but it is just a short step. So it puts me at a little bit of a higher advantage being a small person. I'm almost taller than him, and then the other piece is that he is able to. He can't swivel on me. He can't get it around me. He can't come in from a different direction. It's not a very wide or long area. It's just a narrow doorway. So he really can't go in a lot of directions or places outside of kind of what the task we're working on, which is backwards. And I'm just asking him to back up out of my space. I'm not asking him for like a strict, straight, perfect reverse. I'm just asking for that single step. When I step into you, I would like some space, and I'd like you to respect my space. You know, I'm an animal. I'm a horse. I'm a being too, and I deserve just, you know, I have a bubble, and if I step into your space, then I'm asking you to move. A lot of this is based on safety. In order to keep a horse safe around people, we want them to have a general understanding of respect of people's space. Something that from what I've seen of the handling of this particular horse, he has almost none of that. He's very pushy and in your space without real regard to where you're standing or what you're doing. And so this is all I'm trying to accomplish is getting a simple respect and boundary of my personal space. Additionally, I'm holding food. So that's upping the issue, you know, making that more challenging for him. So you can't really see here. He's a bit behind the wall, so you can't really tell all of the steps that he's taking or exactly what he's doing. But I would say that he's definitely looking out and away from me and in the space that I'm in at this moment. The doorway, he's kind of turning and spending some more time actually looking out and beyond the space of the stall and this doorway. He's starting to kind of want to turn and leave the training session. So I actually joined him down on his level. I actually stepped through the doorway, and now I'm working in the stall. So it's kind of a stall and then a feed room door, and the feed room is behind kind of the stall. And so I'm now stepped into this stall with him. I think I moved the camera here in a minute, so. We have some progress. So I'm taking a single step into him. I'm not giving a whole lot of crop, pushing cue. I'm just stepping with my own feet and my own bubble towards him. And that was enough for about 3 repetitions right there. I stepped into him and he backed up. So very, very, very cool. He's a very food motivated horse. So these training sessions went really quick as long as I had the food. There's work to be done for this horse in the name of connection and communication. But I think that it starts here. It starts with food. And if you have to use a primary reinforcer like food in order to get connection, then so be it. It's not all that important whether or not you have connection first. I think that you can build connection when you're using these types of training tools and these types of training methods of especially positive reinforcement. Food is a primary reinforcer. Every living being requires food in order to survive and thrive and live on this planet. And so food is a natural and primary reinforcer. When it comes to connection, especially connection and connection with and social interaction with humans, for some very domesticated animals, that might come naturally, but usually it's because social interaction with a human or humans in general has brought primary reinforcers to the animal. So then the social interaction with the human becomes fun and pleasurable and then becomes a reinforcer, especially when you're giving the animal choice and control through training, problem solving, mental stimulation, stuff like that can kind of play a part in the reinforcement contingency as well. And so that can also make social interaction with a human more pleasurable and ultimately a reinforcer. I would say for Scout, it doesn't feel like social interaction. Okay, I clicked and I treated for just his own backward step. He readjusted his footing, and so I clicked and treated for him readjusting his footing. That was kind of cool. Nice timing, Kelsey. I'm moving back to a little bit of just having him turn his head away from me, and keeping that the fun piece. Now I'm working a little bit towards trying to step to his shoulder and not have him pivot either his front or his hindquarters, but pivot or turn his head into my bucket. I'm trying to be able to walk along his side and flank and not have him turn into my space. I'd even ask for a tiny step shoulder out or shoulder away from me, which we found out he doesn't know how to do. So I was asking right here and I realized he has no movement in his shoulders. A little sneak peek, I actually work on this in like the next day. I'm like, oh, he wasn't able to turn his shoulder. So I did go back and work on actually some lateral shoulder motion, being able to step to the side with his front end. He can swivel his back end just fine, pivoting on his front, but he is having a hard time pivoting on his back. Oh. Terrain made him itchy. Some food fell on the ground and he was eating it. I stepped to the side. He continued to eat it and he didn't pivot into me like he's doing now. I kind of got a little hard on him here. I honestly kind of pushed this training session way too far. I should have stopped it in the doorway where we were having really good success. I really probably shouldn't have done this, but I did. I gave him a little pet with the crop. He could care less. I added some more hay to the ground or to his mouth. That's good. Yeah, his front end just locks in. He like doesn't move it at all. So I went back to the back to see if I could ask him to back up. Right there, I got to back up. So I think this is the point that I just decided that I needed to stick with the backing process because he was not understanding that sort of lateral sideways. Oh, I think I used the crop. I was about to say, oh my gosh, I think I just said back and he kind of backed, but I think I used a little bit of crop motion. Definitely could use more practice with the clicker, crop, and hay pail situation. There was a number of times in this training session that I got extremely not I was just not coordinated. I was clicking for the wrong things. I was fumbling with the hay. The hay would drop or it wouldn't get to him or whatever. It was just a constant. I know it doesn't seem like I'm doing much. I mean, that I'm feeding him for the tiniest motion out of my space, but that kind of is a lot. This is the thing people think of like with horses, like they've got to be big movements. They've got to be all this, fancy big stuff. And actually, I think people do this with dogs too. That's kind of where the whole prong collar idea comes from, is that it's big and it's chunky and it's fancy and it's harsh and it gets quick visual results. So you see that top surface level result looks big and fancy, and the same thing with like pretty adversive bits and spurs and stuff like that. It definitely gets that high level, top level of showiness out of the animal because they're under pain, which tends to make them move faster, and it definitely drives them in a way, but it drives the body. It's not driving them behavior. So don't get confused. Driving the body and driving the behavior are two totally different things, because we often talk about driving behavior. Well, reinforcement drives behavior. Punishers and adversive tools drive the body because it hurts, so we move away from it. So he's now standing outside the stall, and now I'm using kind of the wider stall door and entrance as kind of a wider version of the gate or the door to the feed room that I was using earlier. So he wanted to kind of come back in right there. I probably could have let him come back in, but I asked him to back up anyways because that's what I wanted to work on. He's out in the rain. This wasn't very nice of me. However, if he had turned his head in towards the main part of the stall, so he did it right there. He turned his head into the main part of the stall, and I allowed him to come in. So that was kind of the difference too, why I was asking him to back, even though he was standing in the rain. He was coming into my space, and I'm standing along the wall. I'm deliberately staying along the wall to give him an option to come back into the stall or out of the rain if he wanted. When he looked towards the inside of the stall and sort of took a step inwards, but he wasn't taking a step into my space exactly. Like, yes, he was close. He was in close proximity, but he wasn't coming at me. He was kind of just trying to move by me. And that's when I stepped back out of the way to allow him to come in, because I felt like that was an ask. Now, did I know that at the moment that I did it? I don't think so. But watching this back, like, that's what I see is I asked, I was positioning myself, and this is so critical with This is so critical with training sessions. In your training environment and your training setups, while you're doing a training session, really you need to think about your physical position in proximity to the animal. Sometimes that is really important. It's maybe even critical to the animal's learning and what they're learning. So if I was positioned in a different place, I may be getting a different result. And every time you move positions, you're also going to get a different result. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind when you're training. Something that I would say a good trainer does is that, where they step or position themselves in a certain environment or in a certain way in the environment so that they are offering questions. Another thing to note about this entire training session, he is completely halterless and ropeless. He could move anywhere he wanted. I'm holding a crop in order to make sure he does not move into my space unsafely. That's what the crop was there for. And then I did utilize it as a cue for a little bit to add a little pressure on him to see if I could kind of move forward more quickly by, in some cases, we might lure an animal by taking the food and putting it in front of their nose and we get a lure. We can apply a small amount of pressure to help encourage a behavior, but the goal is to let off that pressure and move solely to positive reinforcement as the end of the behavior. Or kind of the end result is to get to that positive reinforcement place. And then to have the animal move off of cues that are almost nonverbal and not really there. So anyways, all I was saying is that a good trainer, like if you're watching a video of a good trainer, you're going to see those subtleties of where the trainer places themselves within a room or within the training environment in order to ask questions and give the animal choices or control over the training situation or training environment. So we're starting back up with him eating off of the ground. He lifts his head up and I just wiggle a little bit to tell him that he's in my space, which he may have not noticed totally, or he thought he could get away from it. I tried not to. This is good. I started getting much better with my system by the end of this session. And I was getting more comfortable with him and his mannerisms and body language. Another thing I just did is he bumped my hand. And in bumping my hand, I did not move or wiggle or swat at him. So he was able to come in and touch me. He can nose me and my body. That's okay. The rule is don't put your head in my bucket and don't push your weight into my space. If a horse reaches out with their nose to say hi, to smell you, that's to me, very respectful. Most of the time that's pretty harmless and that's not going to get you a human into a lot of trouble with a horse. When we get into trouble is when we are battling their mass versus just their face. And a lot of us like that contact. We want our horses to like nuzzle in with us and be snuggly with us. I mean, they're a large animal. You can't just like curl up in bed with them necessarily. So their face is the most snuggly part of them. And so when they bring their nose and their face into you, that's okay. And what's really cool is I kind of moved or jolted a little because I was expecting him to go into the treat bucket and he just sniffed my hand. And sniffing my hand, I actually kind of brushed him or allowed him to bump my hand a little bit with the backside of my hand on his nose. And then I didn't swat at him or move my crop or make any big motion that said back off of me. And he stayed there. He did move his head away from me and then kind of came back and looked at me again. But that was really a cool moment as well to point out. I can just tell we've made a breakthrough. Both my own system of reinforcement has kind of taken hold. Woo. And then I gave him some scratches. So he tried to go for my bucket. I kind of corrected by swiping with my crop. He moved away quite rapidly, like, oh no, I'm in trouble. And he turned his head back towards me and I gave him a scratch to show him like, look, my hands are not necessarily going to be coming after you. And I'll give you scratches. So I repositioned again because I dropped some hay and I want to just let him have it and not deal with it. Good. So he stopped short of my bucket. I did give a warning by pulling the crop up to warn, but he stopped short of the bucket, so I didn't actually swat at him at all. And you can see my swatting, I'm not like reaching out and whacking at him. I'm simply in place moving the crop in a way that if he moves his head any further forward, he will in himself smack himself. Right there, I guess I did have a little forward motion in it, but most of it is to try and just block the bucket. There. I put a little bit more pressure. He was just getting a little pushy. I'm also now in a not the best spot in the stall. I'm in a pretty tight corner. I know my camera's behind me too, so I started getting a little stressed about the camera being bumped by him, as well as I couldn't back up anymore, so it was really up to him to then now back off. So all this training, putting it together, and I get to put myself in a corner and see if he gets out of my space. It didn't really work that way, but I did end up having to apply a little bit more pressure to get him to respond. But he was really, really happy with this training session. Like, this really worked out where, oh no, he's gonna knock my camera over. Thanks for joining me here on the Cast channel. If you would like more information, more videos like this, please like and subscribe. Hit the bell notification. I think that gives you, notifications. Also, check out kindanimalservices.com. We have a blog that I am consistently trying to work on beefing it up and making it like a place and a resource for animal training information and more videos like this as well. All right, that's a wrap. See you in another video.